So the topic of session 4 is climate change. As you see on the screen, to stop the climate change, to stop the climate crisis and establish a sustainable society, what efforts must we put in? What does the future of sustainable cities look like? What type of technology is needed for future-oriented societies? We will invite a non-engineer again to open the session. Let me introduce Ms. Ji-hyun Sung. Ms. Sung is a student and the youngest Greenpeace campaigner in Korea. Ms. Sung engages in diverse activities to protect the environment and will talk about her views and experiences on climate change. Please introduce yourself and tell us your thoughts, Ms. Sung. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Cherry Sung, the youngest campaigner of Greenpeace Korea, a member of Youth for Climate Korea, and the founder of an organization called Greener is Cleaner. 2 years ago, I was bombarded by articles calling the climate crisis the existential crisis. And this 12-year-old girl could not just ignore the nature's warning. Since then, I've continuously taken action to create positive changes in the environment as a youth. And today, I would like to introduce session 4, climate change issues and challenges in urban environment, by asking you these questions. How can the Earth and humankind be healed together? What should we do to stop the climate crisis and promote a sustainable society? What will the future of the sustainable city look like? What skills do we need in a futuristic city? Due to the global pandemic COVID-19, people's lifestyles, technology, businesses, and every part of the world has changed. Now we're facing the unprecedented crisis, creating further damage in this SDG progress, with the world's poorest and most vulnerable affected the most. With accelerating climate change, the demand for sustainable cities is extensible to all parts of the world. We must put social and environmental considerations above profit maximization. It is more necessary now than ever to establish and comply with policies that defend our rights to live in a safe environment, because only then will we have the safe, fair, resilient, and sustainable cities that the time in which we live in demands. Recently, the lockdowns in response to COVID-19 have significantly lowered environmental pollutions. However, this improvement is likely to be only a temporary reprieve from the long-term unhealthy situation. Once the lockdowns ease, air pollution will climb back to its pre-pandemic level. Why? Because the molecules of these gases stay in the atmosphere for a long time. Methane for around 12 years, and carbon dioxide for over 200 years. Wait, what was it? 200 years. It is time that we have to hold firm in our convictions, because we are the future and we will live in the future. In year 2020, the Earth needs a hero. You all, be my hero. Thank you.
Thank you, Ji-hyun, Cherry Sung, for your speech and especially for your hard work. Next, we have to invite someone who could give us the answers to Cherry's question. So let me introduce Dr. Won-taek-wan, the moderator of session 4. She was the 4th Korea Society of Climate Change Research Chairperson and is currently the 4th Executive Director of APEC Climate Center. I'll now hand over my microphone to Dr. Kwon.
Well, thank you, Ji-hyun, for your excellent speech. And she asked us 4 questions, including, can the Earth and humankind be healed together? This is, I think, a very important question laid before us. Recently, WMO and other international organizations made a report on today's climate crisis. This report includes global temperature has risen 1.1 degrees since the 19th century. And also there are many natural disasters associated with the heat waves, heavy rainfalls, typhoon, hurricanes, and also forest fires and melting Arctic ice and Antarctica, Greenland, and so on. Sea level rise. And also, as Jihyun talked about this just a while ago, that the reason for this global warming is, of course, the man-made carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, and the concentration of carbon dioxide is continuously rising at this moment. There are overwhelming evidences of global warming and climate crisis. Today, we would like to discuss on the role of cities to stop this climate crisis and how to transform societies for sustainable future. Okay, we have 3 speakers and 3 panelists like other sessions, and each speaker will have 15 minutes for the presentation, and also each panelist will have 10 minutes. But please keep in mind that we have to, keep this timeline. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A session after all. Okay. And let me introduce the first speaker, Mr. Sang-hyuk Kim, the president of Jeju Research Institute. Please. Mr. Sang-hyuk Kim is currently a visiting professor at CAETS Green Growth College and has been the director of CAETS Sustainable Development Center since 2017. He contributed towards setting a low-carbon green growth vision while serving as the Future Vision Secretary for the President. Title of his talk is Jeju Green Big Bang. Yeah, let's see the Big Bang.
Big Bang.
Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The session 4 is about climate change and cities. And as a person who truly believes that the climate change is simply the biggest challenge of our time, it is really an existential threat. So nothing can be much to deal with this great challenge. And city is a kind of aggregate or assembly of our life itself. We sleep in the city, we eat in the city, we make money in the city, we spend money in the city. We use energy in the city, we use mobility in the city. So to address fundamentally the climate change risks, the city must be changed dramatically. And today I'm going to talk about the Jeju case. Jeju is pushing a kind of very ambitious movement toward a low-carbon economy and society. Well, I have 3 agendas for that today. First, Korea's low-carbon green growth in retrospect. To understand the dramatic change in Jeju, I think I must tell you about Korea's low-carbon green growth history. Number 2 is what is happening right now in Jeju under the name of Green Big Bang and Carbon-Free Island Jeju. Number 3 is challenge and new deal strategies. Time is running. I have prepared lots of slides, but I must finish it within 15 minutes. Okay, I will do my best. Yeah, as some of you might remember, in the year 2008, with the beginning of the new administration under President Lee Myung-bak, low carbon green growth became a number one national vision. I'll keep it brief in this slide. It's not just about acting against the climate change. It is about transforming the huge challenges into new opportunities. So from BAU, business as usual, we must move toward to BAW, business as wanted. And it would give us double-digit trillion opportunities. That's how Korea's low carbon green growth paradigm began to be implemented. But sadly enough, only a month later, however, there came the global financial crisis starting from the Wall Street. Only 1 month after the proclamation of the national new vision of green growth. So many people thought and said Korea would be the fastest sinking ship even before the green growth vision gets started. But we fought back with the Green New Deal. That was a 50 trillion Korean won scale. So that was the first Green New Deal was kind of providing a huge stimulus package while preparing for the future-oriented low-carbon infrastructure. And to make sure it is going toward really green way, we set up for the first time our national emission reduction target voluntarily. It was minus 4% cut by 2020. So to implement that, we also set up greenhouse gas inventory center. And to make sure we don't lose any momentum, we try to institutionalize almost everything that is important. That's why we have a very important legal framework, such as Framework Act on Low Carbon Green Growth, Act on the Smart Grid, and Green Building Promotion Act, and finally, Act on Emission Trading Scheme. They are all still alive. And we also try to internationalize our green growth strategy. And that's how we have the Global Green Growth Institute. My dear friend Frank is here with me. That's kind of for the first time of its kind in the history of diplomacy. So it started with the 17 member countries. Half of them are developing, half of them developed countries. That was initiated by Korea, and that's now it became bigger and mature and playing a pivotal role in the world. That's how we have that international organization, Global Green Growth Institute, and that's why we hosted very desperately to host the headquarters of Green Climate Fund, beating Germany and Switzerland. The GCF, two important international organizations are now here to make sure the green growth journey go and continue. And we put a lot of money to fight against the global financial crisis, not to mention climate change, but it didn't do harm to our economy. Many economists thought if you invest that a lot of money in the green sector, it would lose Korea's economic competitive. That turned out to be not that true. As you see in this slide, Korea was the most successful country among OECD countries when it comes to economic recovery and economic growth. And in injecting big-scale Green New Deal, we created very meaningful job creation effect. More than 750,000 jobs. If we invested elsewhere, well, we couldn't have created that much job creation impact. And we were really very thoughtful that the Green New Deal money go to the technology R&D sector. So that's why we dramatically increased green technology R&D during those years. And thankfully, so our global green competitiveness became much more competitive. It was only 15th in the year 2005, but it became 7th in the world in 2010. And the HSBC at that time estimated if Korea continued this kind of pace, green R&D expenditure, Korea would be number 4 in the year 2015. But it didn't continue, to my sorrow. I will tell you later. Okay. And we even raised the electricity tariff 7 times during that administration to make sure carbon is not free. So this is the result, I think, really meaningful. As you see in this slide, in the year 2010, our emission growth rate was almost 10%, while our economic growth rate was about 6%. But in the year 2012, it plummeted to 0.4, emission growth rate, while the economy was about 2.3 growth. And in the year 2014, it even went to minus. So it could be interpreted, Korea can decouple with its economic growth and emission growth. But the politics, as is many cases around the world, after the political regime change, it didn't go well enough. And sadly, the emission is increasing again since 2014. But as you know well, the Moon Jae-in administration came up with Korea's New Deal facing the pandemic crisis. It is more than 100 billion. So it will give us another hope to go for green. Okay, now let me tell you about Jeju Green Big Bang. What is Green Big Bang? The guys standing with me is Jeremy Rifkin, who wrote the book Green New Deal and many meaningful books. And he advised us a lot at that time during our first Korea's Green New Deal. And we came to the conclusion that this is a time where we can change energy. This is a time where we can change transport. And new digital technology will help those two things move together in a sustainable, in a low carbon way. He described it as a third industrial revolution, and I describe it as a green Big Bang, because we need to move much faster and much bigger. The idea is simple. Let the renewable energy, let the energy storage system, let the electric vehicle or mobility, let the smart grid or ICT digital work together and create new industrial ecosystem. According to a study done by McKinsey and the Coalition for Our Common Future, it is going to be a 1 trillion market opportunity by the year 2020, this year, That study was done 5 years ago, and that turns out to be true. And why Jeju? But I do believe one of the important outcome of the Paris Agreement is about new trilateral partnership. That is a partnership among local government, civil society, and business community. That's because that's where things are really happening. I work with the Blue House, so I made a lot of abstract things, but real things are happening in the city level. So we must make a choice where a new things that can show the future should be selected, and Jeju volunteered to do that. Jeju is the largest island in Korea, the cleanest and beautiful place, and its population is 700,000. And Dr. Kwon knows very well, Jeju is a place where dramatic climate change is happening. So it was prepared in the year 2012, and it was formally announced at the Paris Climate Summit in the year 2015 by the Jeju Governor Won Hee-ryong. The idea is simple. Let the renewable energy be 100% energy source in Jeju. And let every vehicle running in Jeju, electric vehicle and eco-friendly one. Yeah, simple. Look at the result as of now, 2015. So the renewable energy penetration rate is about 14%. It used to be 16, 17 last year, but I'll tell you, due to the surge, we should curtail those excess energy. But that's number one in Korea, and 20,000 electric vehicles are now running in Jeju. That's also number one. Maybe that number does not sound that much impressive to you, but it started from a scratch. We have done that during the 5 years, but that's not enough. But anyway, so while going through this change, we are faced with several challenges. Number one is getting social license from the people. If people living in Jeju does not like Jeju Green Big Bang or Jeju Carbon Free project, it cannot go further. So we must set up really important social governance to embrace the voices and interests of the Jeju people. So we are going to launch three-tier governance. One is, most important, local citizen-based governance. Number two is expert-based governance. Number three is business governance. And as I said earlier, Korea government announced the Green New Deal project. We are going to set up a new committee for Green Big Bang and Green New Deal in the foreseeable future. Another problem, we didn't expect this happen this earlier, but it happened in many countries where they produce renewable energies. Well, we rapidly expanded renewable energy production, but the surge of renewable power generation happened. And it is invoking a problem known as curtailment. Cut it out. 5 years, that kind of curtailment amounted only 3 cases. But this year, more than 54 times by September. The excess energy, green energy, is just being wasted. So what would be the solution? I like to hear solutions from the worldwide excellent engineers, but we will do everything And that some of them are going to happen. For example, let me tell you about V2G, vehicle to grid. Well, we have 20,000 electric vehicles, and we are going to expand the number of electric vehicles. And when the electric vehicles are connected to the grid in a smart way, then the vehicle will be an energy carrier. So when the electricity price is expensive, the electric vehicle will upload its electricity to the grid. And when the tariff is not that expensive or cheap, then the electric vehicle will download the electricity from the grid. So it will play like an energy prosumer. Well, ESS, we are obviously going to expand ESS. And a lot of new ideas are coming. And we are even going to generate hydrogen with the excess power, excess electric power. But to realize these solutions, in reality, regulation reform must be done. Regulation reform must be done. Let everyone trade energy. From the start, we must enable small-scale electric power exchange freely. And we must introduce flexible electric power tariff. And to make sure all these efforts are going to the green direction, we are going to set up Jeju tailored greenhouse gas inventory center. And we are going to construct energy mobility big data platform. And regarding this reform agenda, yesterday, the Governor Won Hee-ryong made a presentation in front of President Moon Jae-in at the Blue House. And I heard President Moon Jae-in was very proactive to implement those reform agenda into reality. I'm excited to hear advanced stories. Yeah, and well, we are going to replace more than 300,000 cars into electric and fuel cell vehicles. Now we have 20,000 electric vehicles. That's not enough. So we need to make another important decision. From the year 2030, Jeju will ban the registration of internal combustion engine at all. Period. And we are also going to invite autonomous vehicles that will be without doubt fueled by green energy, and we are going to build up infrastructure to embrace those new clean smart mobilities. And this is the last slide. In the end, Jeju is going to produce 3 times bigger than its real demand. So Jeju is going to be our renewable energy 300 city. We are going to build a highway for excess electricity in the end. And please meet the new frontier in Jeju. I don't think technology is a problem. What matters is the political will. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with the new ambitious plan of Jeju. But unfortunately, we are short of time. So let's continue to the next speaker. Good morning. Next speaker is Richard J. Dawson, Professor of Earth System Engineering and Civil Engineering at England University of Newcastle. He is currently researching City Integrated Evaluation System Facility, which is a combination of economy forecast, change in land use, climate effect, and emission accounting tools. Hi, Professor Dawson.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you for participating this CAETS. And he prepared a talk about climate resilient cities and infrastructure. Please, Professor Dawson.
Thank you very much. And first of all, it's a great honor to be speaking here today. And I'm very sorry that the global circumstances mean I'm unable to be there in person. It would have been very nice to continue these conversations throughout a few days. However, I'm going to give a talk about my experience of tackling the impacts of climate change. So we've heard a lot about mitigation greenhouse gases, but my work focuses more on preparing infrastructure and cities for climate change risks. I mean, around the UK and of course the rest of the world, we're all experiencing a number of increasingly frequent extreme weather events, whether that is wildfires, droughts, floods, and so on, leading to substantial disruption to our infrastructure systems, collapses of bridges, loss of power, failure of transport systems. One of my other roles within the UK is actually as a member of the Committee on Climate Change. We advise the government and we scrutinise the government's progress in delivering the Climate Change Act of 2008, which commits the UK not just to decarbonisation, but to preparing itself for the impacts of climate change. Some of the analysis we did a couple of years ago highlighted how even under a 2 degrees global warming future, there are significant increases in risks in our cities and to our infrastructure sectors. If we do not meet our Paris Agreement commitments globally, then we might see a tripling in terms of flood damages across the UK, or indeed 8 times the disruption of our railway services, for example. And so the thing is, what we have to do is do things different. We have to build our cities differently. And this slide here highlights how if we were to build, I suppose, upgrade developing country cities to the same standard in the same way that we have built cities in the developed world, then we would increase their carbon footprint substantially. If we were to build all new future development in cities by 2050, then we will actually end up using around a quarter of the total emissions budget available to us to meet the Paris Agreement 2 degrees C global target. So that's saying we cannot build our infrastructure in the way that we have done in the past. So how do we go about doing this? How do we do things differently? Well, one of those approaches is around different ways of meeting demand and delivering supply. And I think we heard some very nice examples around how to tackle some of those challenges in the energy sector. Within the built environment, the challenges are similar but different. Some of the opportunities include use of green spaces, green infrastructure, both to manage surface water flooding or to act as a sort of carbon sink within our urban environment, to build using different types of materials, such as this ambitious proposal in Tokyo to build a timber skyscraper, or indeed just introducing a much higher level of energy efficiency, water efficiency, and if you like, better resistance to floods and so on in the way that we design and build our housing. Another approach is to actually manage the demand. So the previous example is all about changing how we build. But here, a case study in Lisbon shows how in this city of Portugal, that moving from individual automobile transports to shared mobility. So this is using buses that you call on demand, essentially sharing large taxis with groups of people, massively reduces the number of vehicles on the road, results in more or lower driving amounts per person, lowers costs, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and actually provides greater equitability of access to key services. So the figure, for example, there shows how under the shared mobility model, more people can get to healthcare facilities in under 30 minutes than they have been able to previously because of congestion on the road. And so by changing demand, changing the way we use our infrastructure, we can also make it more resilient and more energy efficient. An alternative strategy is to think about adaptation across infrastructure scales and between different sectors of infrastructure. So here are two examples of infrastructure networks. On the left-hand side is the transport network, the major roads and railway systems in the City of London in the UK. And the right-hand airline network shows a famous British airline route network. And you can see it's very heavily concentrated around one location, that is in the UK, of course. And were these networks to be impacted by some sort of extreme event, then they start to fail and be disrupted in different ways. The red line on this graph corresponds roughly to how the London transport network on the left, the figure on the left, would fail. So larger flood events or windstorms lead to an increasing proportion of that network being disrupted. Whereas the airline network that is very heavily clustered around two major airports in London as the sort of distribution of all of those flight routes fails far more abruptly with a far smaller number of incidents or scale of incidents like flooding to cause major disruption to the whole system. So we see a catastrophic failure after we meet a certain tipping point in terms of the size of the flood event or windstorm or so on. And this property of infrastructure is something we've looked at in terms of how we might design more resilient infrastructure networks for the future. And we've applied this to the UK's electricity network. So this is called the national grid. And so using the baseline, this is the figure in the middle of this plot, we've looked at how different types of investment strategy in terms of improving the redundancy of the network or strengthening the individual assets, whether those are power generation sites, making them more resilient to flooding, or making our pylon networks, overhead lines, more resilient to windstorms. And an alternative strategy of, if you like, decentralizing the locations of generation. So this is similar to some of the renewable energy generation strategies where we see more locations providing smaller sources of generation and they're more evenly distributed across the country. And it was this strategy of decentralization coupled with increased infrastructure network redundancy to move power around and allow it to rebalance in case of small-scale disruptions that actually had a very positive effect on the resilience of the overall electricity network. So even under higher levels of climate change, we were able to manage that risk by changing the nature of the national grid structure. And we've done similar sorts of studies in Newcastle, and this is my home city here in the northeast of England, where we've looked at, in this case, flooding on the road transport network. And what we showed is using similar sort of approach, actually, by focusing adaptation efforts to manage floods in just 6 locations in the whole city of a very complex road transport network, we were able to reduce disruptions from flooding by about 50%. So that is just engineering 6 locations, 6 stretches of road within the city. Of course, as you introduce and engineer more, then you reduce that disruption further. But it was very interesting to me that only 6 locations could have such a beneficial effect. And at times when we have limited budget available, identifying where to get the best return on investment is crucial. And this third element is really looking across sectors. Here we see an example of 2 different networks, the blue A network and the red B network. And those could be energy and information communications technology networks or transport networks and so on. And what we looked at here is, well, as our networks become increasingly interconnected and our road network relies on power and communications to operate, well, what if one of those networks fell down? How do we reduce disruption to our other infrastructure systems? And we explored the idea of what we called permutable or adaptable infrastructure, where one component of infrastructure could actually act and support 2 of these networks by switching its function, like this. And there are examples of this appearing around the world, where in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, for example, we see road tunnels that also operate as flood relief channels during the monsoon season. Examples of roads acting as emergency airstrips, or electric vehicles that we heard about also being able to act as batteries to return power to households and the national grid. And by introducing this idea of flexible infrastructure, we were actually able to protect more of each infrastructure network from failing during extreme weather event simulations. And this was a very important conclusion, especially if you recall in my previous slide where I said 6 locations in one city could significantly reduce the disruption of flooding. Well, if we were able to provide those benefits, not just for the transport network, but for other networks as well, that's a very significant implication for strategies for designing resilient cities. And so the final issue I wanted to explore was, I think, to raise the challenge of how difficult this can be. That quite often cities are tackling multiple challenges. I've talked a bit about flooding. I talked a bit about windstorm, but they're also tackling issues of extreme heat or trying to introduce accessibility to allow people to travel efficiently between their homes and workplaces and shops and other services. As well as that, we don't want to build on all of our green spaces. We want to keep those open to allow people to have healthy lifestyles, to have benefits for urban cooling and exercise and so on. And so what we've done is developed what we termed a spatial optimization algorithm that we applied to the City of London to look how these different objectives that London had set itself to become flood resilient, to reduce the risks of extreme heat, to not increase its urban density, to preserve its green spaces. And all of these different objectives are very important and well meant in terms of delivering sustainability, but are they all achievable together? And what we showed first off was that you could substantially improve upon all of those objectives compared to the old London plan. So the plan that we were looking at was a few years old. And we showed that you could improve upon that in terms of reducing flood risk, heat risk, preserving more green space, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from travel, just by changing where we prioritize for development. And then we started to look at, well, can we actually achieve all of our objectives? Can we make a low carbon city, a low risk city, whilst preserving all of our green spaces? And actually, this graph here shows how these different city types, the low carbon city, the low risk London city, and the green and spacious London city, you cannot meet all of these objectives simultaneously in London without introducing some of the other technologies and strategies that I have mentioned. So we could meet some of these, all of these objectives, were we to change the urban density, so the density of housing. We could meet these if we also move towards a shared mobility model. But just by building in the way we do at the moment, we cannot reduce all of our risks and reduce all of our greenhouse gas emissions in London. We have to do and introduce new technologies and new approaches. And so to end things up, managing the risks to cities and infrastructure and meeting, you know, wider sustainable development and climate goals does need this sort of integrated approach. We need to think across sectors and across systems and across spatial scales if we're to achieve it. We can do this through working with natural processes like some of the green infrastructure I talked about earlier, deploying new technologies that balance different types of supply and demand management. We also need to recognize how the actual structure of our infrastructure networks and our cities mediates our risk. But I think the final point is that there isn't a single magic bullet that allows us to achieve everything everywhere. And we have to recognize that each city is different. We're starting from different initial points. And so we have to respect that local context and design appropriate mixes of these strategies according to the location and the city that we're working in. And with that, I thank you very much and pass back to the chair.
Thank you, Professor Dawson. I know that UK is one of the leading countries in this aspect. And actually, I prepared a question, but since we are running out of time, if I have time, I will give you a question during the Q&A session. Is that okay?
Of course, okay. Delighted.
Yeah, thank you. Please stay online. And thank you for your speech. And let me introduce a third speaker today. And next speaker is the Frank Lisbman, Secretary General of GGGI. He has worked towards strengthening programs and partnerships in the health, disaster response, and climate change adjustment areas at international organizations. Yeah, thank you. Please. Oh, I have to give you the talk. It's over there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
And it's my pleasure to be here with you today. It was a very nice introduction of Professor Kim Sang-yup about the history of green growth in Korea that led to the establishment of the Green Growth Institute that I now lead. And I will speak not about Jeju or Korea, I'll speak a bit more about emerging and developing economies that GDGI focuses on, because we are an organization set up to support the acceleration of this green transformation in developing countries. But I am an engineer, and today I speak particularly about the role of technology, green technology, to help fight the climate crisis. But while I agree that the climate crisis is the existential threat that we have to deal with, I'd also like to remind you that this is part of a larger sustainability crisis. And I will, of course, talk a little bit about COVID-19 and whether we can indeed recover from the COVID-19 pandemic in a green way, particularly focus on the role of green technologies, and then say a few words about the Green Deal as well. So yes, as the previous speaker highlighted, I've worked on climate change for about 40 years with other scientists who believed that this was real and an important threat. But I think it was only last year that we actually saw demonstrations out in the street with the public demanding that their government take action. Young people like Cherry Sung standing up and saying we have a school strike for climate, and indeed governments taking action to pass climate laws. So climate change is an absolute priority, but of course here in Seoul, air pollution is probably even more important to people. Now we're all wearing masks, but I was already wearing a mask last year, which many of my friends and colleagues in Europe have a hard time to believe, for air pollution reasons. And air pollution is an enormous problem as well, a silent killer responsible for as many of 7 million deaths a year. And if you compare that to the deaths as a result of the COVID pandemic, then you wonder why we are not more worried about the other sides of the sustainability crisis. Air pollution indeed, or the plastic crisis in the oceans. Large parts of the oceans which have become, well, if you look at the picture, terrible examples of what we obviously don't want to see. With almost all of the plastic that we generate, and here in Korea I have to say, I'm very impressed by how beautiful things are and how organized they are and how well packaged things are, but also by the overuse of packaging in almost all the products that we buy. So we have to rethink many ways of how we live. And this year, of course, suddenly we were forced to rethink so many things in such a hurry. I've been impressed that we are now suddenly able to do things that we couldn't before, that we are adjusting so rapidly to the new normal, and that we are finding large amounts of money to fight the COVID crisis and to think about recovering from the COVID crisis. And I hope that we can do that in a way that is indeed green and that helps to fight the climate crisis at the same time. In the beginning of the year, I was, to be honest, a bit worried that all the attention for COVID would take away from the other sustainability issues, but we're seeing from opinion poll after opinion poll that in fact a lot of the population, a lot of people have realized through the COVID pandemic that there is a sustainability issue and that people are able to tie these things together, that there is more interest in sustainability and in the climate crisis, and that indeed people are willing to think how we can achieve sustainability and green growth post-COVID-19. Can we build back better? We came out with a report and we find that there are many opportunities for that. Probably the most important is that in almost every recovery from COVID-19, the first priority for governments is on job creation. And the good news is that there are many green jobs in that green recovery. In fact, countries have prepared their NDCs, the nationally determined contribution for the Paris Agreement, almost exclusively to show how they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Few of them actually calculated what the jobs impact of those NDCs would be. So we worked with some of our member countries, particularly Mexico, Indonesia, and Rwanda, and we could demonstrate that the large numbers of green jobs from simply implementing what government committed to do in their NDCs were 2 to 5 times higher than investing those same amounts of money into the brown or the fossil fuel-based economy. So there is good news. We can create green jobs from a green recovery, and that's probably the most important argument for many governments to take a holistic approach, to look at COVID-19 and at dealing with a number of these other challenges, particularly the climate crisis. So with that as introduction, what is the role of green technology? And Professor Kim Sang-yuk said he doesn't believe that technology is the problem. I would turn that around. I guess I'm more of a technology optimist. I think that technology will be critical in fighting the climate crisis. Of course, renewable energy has become so commonplace now, but I'm old enough that as a student, we looked at the potential of green technology, and we thought the maximum potential would be like 5%, of the total energy supply. And I remember quite a few discussions here in Korea last year when the government increased the total share of renewable energy to 20% by 2020, 30%, that a lot of Koreans felt that was a very high rate. But in the UK, the country where the previous speaker is from, they switched from coal, more than 50% coal in their energy mix, to almost no coal in about 10 years, and increased renewable energy massively. And of course, other countries in Europe, like Denmark, have shown that you can get to almost 100%. Now, how do they do that without running into curtailment? Partly by integrating their energy networks. And in Denmark, they can produce so much wind because they combine with Norway, where they use their hydropower, which plays very well with wind, and indeed combined, they manage to have a very, very high share of renewable energy. But of course, the other good news is that batteries have become so much more affordable. Here you see them in cars. Norway is one of the countries where they have heavily promoted the use of electrical cars. Teslas, I think, are almost the most popular car there. They've gone to more than half of all new cars sold already becoming electric vehicles. And more countries are indeed saying from 2030, 2035, we will ban the use of the car with an internal combustion engine. That is a revolution that we could not have foreseen, I would say, even 5-10 years ago. But the other use of such battery-based energy storage is also that the same Tesla company, when southern Australia, where they also increased renewable energy quite a bit, and they were running into the same kind of issues that Professor Kim Sang-yup explained for Jeju, Tesla said, we'll put 200 megawatt of batteries into your backyard in 100 days. When I read that, I thought that was a joke. But the Australian government took them up on it, and they did build more than 200 megawatts of battery storage in southern Australia, and in less than a year's time, they've concluded that that was a profitable investment. Not only is it technologically feasible, renewable energy, battery storage, it's commercially attractive. And why is that so important? That's hugely important because it doesn't have to be government money or ODA. It can be private sector investment that will help implement these technologies. That is probably the largest source of my optimism that it will indeed happen. Electric buses are not introduced as widely. Even here in Seoul, we don't have such a high share of electric buses yet. There are, of course, the famous cities in China where they're all electric buses, more than 16,000. But we see in many of our developing country members that there is a deep interest in bus rapid transit systems with electric buses. There are not that many on the road yet, but if I translate from just a few years ago when nobody was thinking about this, bus rapid transit systems would still buy diesel buses, and now we see that there is a deep interest in bus rapid transit systems, and that light electric vehicles, in countries like Laos, motorbikes, which are the majority of the transportation systems, even bought new, are cheaper electric than conventional. So this is an area that I expect to change very rapidly, and where there's a lot of opportunity for, if you like, maturing the technologies that we already have. Of course, a little bit further away is hydrogen, not quite really ready to be rolled out to developing countries, but I think quite promising. A lot of countries like Korea, Japan, Australia, and in Europe are investing heavily. So I would say 5 years, 10 years out, hydrogen produced with renewable energy can become a large-scale storage opportunity that would really provide an all-round clean solution for energy in transportation, in industry, and so on. In the meantime, where technology is really not that exciting, but where the opportunities are huge, in buildings, we have so many mature technologies, but it isn't moving fast enough, right? We could have retrofitted buildings. I have retrofitted our headquarters here in Seoul to be LEED Gold, and then our building became LEED Gold. But the number of buildings that is LEED Gold or Platinum is still quite low here in Seoul and in many other places. There's a huge opportunity, and in fact, a good opportunity for COVID-19 recovery as well, because retrofitting buildings is quite labor intensive. So it's a key part of many Green Deal packages in Europe, and I believe here in Korea as well. And yes, I think we heard a little bit from the previous speaker as well. It is actually possible to build passive houses, and if we were to do that at a much larger scale, combining a whole series of technologies that individually are already quite mature, we could revolutionize the way we build residential infrastructure. Of course, we could also do much more for large-scale infrastructure. And I give you this example because this is not Seoul, this is not Europe, this is Rwanda, where the government was building a new airport. I met with the minister and I asked him, is your airport going to be green? And the minister laughed. He said, it's an airport. What can we do? I said, well, you could look at it. And he was interested, and our team looked at it, and it turned out they could change a few things. The cooling system was really over-dimensioned. They could deal with cooling a bit differently. They could do rainwater harvesting. They could integrate solar panels. And Rwanda's new airport will be a green airport, certified by Singapore's organization. But more importantly, it will be cheaper. That's what really convinced the minister. And I think like that, there are many opportunities that we don't normally look at to green our infrastructure. Well, I'll pay a bit more attention to a few less city parts that are also very important. Many organizations, particularly in the environmental area, believe that we have many more green opportunities in the build with nature or natural climate solutions, from avoiding reforestation, deforestation to reforestation, to a whole series of other solutions that do not get enough attention. And I won't pay that much attention today here either because I don't have time. Probably the least well developed is something that I believe is very important, that's climate smart agriculture. Partly because in some countries that focus on dairy or on livestock, like Ireland or New Zealand, agriculture is responsible for a large share of the emissions, but more so because in many developing countries, a critical impact of climate is on or through the food system. And of course, there are also many linkages between food security, health, nutrition, and chronic diseases like diabetes. So I think this is an area where technology, not only in agriculture per se, but also in food science, could bring about a large change in our overall food systems, having an impact on climate change as well as on the health of the population. A lot of the countries where we work, like in the Pacific, yes, they're worried about climate change, but probably an as big risk for them is that close to 80% of the population is overweight, and diabetes is a #1 health risk. Well, I won't talk much about the other areas, but there are very interesting technological opportunities to reuse waste. And generally speaking, that points to a lot of other opportunities to recycle materials and work on the circular economy. And I'd like to say that governments should also focus on providing opportunities for entrepreneurship, because while large companies from Samsung and LG often take the lion's share of the attention, the lion's share of the jobs is provided by small and medium enterprises, and stimulating green innovation is very important. My last slide then, after this one that focuses on leadership, and I won't get round to talking about the Green New Deal because I'm running out of time. I wanted to say though, the Green Deal is hugely important, but doesn't yet have a target, a net zero 2050 target. So I'm still hoping that the government can be convinced by the time that the P4G summit rolls around next year to not only have all these wonderful investments, but to tie that in with an ambitious climate target, preferably net zero by 2050. And we have come up with a nice report to show that green deals are not only important for Europe and for Korea, but are also a very important opportunity for emerging and developing economies. A little bit different investments, more focus on natural systems, more focus on agriculture, but in the end, if combined with the right kind of policies, opportunities where $1 billion investment can provide something like 250,000 jobs. So I'll leave it at that, but to say that I don't think green technology is a problem, I believe it is actually a critical ingredient for a sustainable future. And whether you want to call that the circular economy, or bioeconomy, or green economy, altogether I think these principles point to a need to focus on more sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and more inclusive growth as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. After Dr. Lisbon's talk, I am more optimistic about our future. Yeah, but I think maybe this green technology is probably what we should ask to the prominent group of engineers attending this this conference. Okay. Thank you for the most excellent presentations from the speakers. And now we will have 3 panelists who will share their opinions on this topic. Let us introduce them. Please. Okay, first panelist is Akhilesh Gupta, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, advisor of Indian Ministry of Science and Technology Climate Change Program. He is an expert in weather forecast, climate change, weather and climate modeling, natural disaster management, etc. He will introduce India's National Network Research Program on urban climate. Now we have Dr. Gupta. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants attending this important symposium across the world. Thank you very much, organizer, for inviting me to deliver this talk. I am going to present the talk on the India's National Network Research Program on Urban Climate. I think we all know that the global temperatures are increasing with time, and this is a plot for 139 years showing that, in recent decades, the temperatures are increasing very rapidly. This being at the global scale, the temperature rise is of the order of, say, about 1 degree centigrade over a period of century. However, the urbanization is in fact becoming a new global change, and the amount of the magnitude of the change that is taking place at the urban scale is very, very high. For example, the temperature change in the urban cluster can go up as much as 3 to 4 degrees centigrade higher than the global change. And similarly, the precipitation intensity and urban hydrology are going to be very different from the normal rainfall pattern as impacted by the global change. Some of the features that we know about the urban climate is, for example, because of the buildings and infrastructure, also the lack of vegetation and the population density and so many other anthropogenic activities that are taking place in the city, the warming is taking place. And similarly, in the hydrology side, the kind of precipitation pattern that is seen influenced by the high population density are very different, and they are threatening the very infrastructure of the cities, and that get exposed to such kind of changes. By and large, the changes that we see at the, say, in the temperature domain, we see that there is an urban heat island uh, being created in the urban clusters where the population density or the human activity is more intense. And that, along with the urban heat island, we see the heat stress is in fact coming as a result of combined effect of the heat wave plus the local heat island that are created. In the rainfall area, I think we are seeing that urban floods are becoming more pronounced and more frequent, and their intensity and duration also showing increase. Also, there is a shift in the location and the timing of these rainfall. Uh, Beside these two, we also have several other impacts, and they are also influencing the city life to a great extent. For example, the air pollution is in fact dominating entire cities of the world, and also the other anthropogenic activities are impacting the infrastructure in the city. In India, in fact, in 2008, the government of India had launched a national action plan on climate change. This national action plan had several national mission. Five out of the 8 missions were on mitigations, and three of them are on adaptation. The Department of Science and Technology, to which I belong, is actually implementing two national missions. One on the national mission for sustaining the Himalayan ecosystem, and the other one is a national mission on strategic knowledge for climate change. As a part of the national mission on strategic knowledge system, we thought of launching an urban climate network. The reason to treat urban climate separately from the global climate is that the scale and intensity of the urban climate is very different. Also, the normal global models or regional models meant for the global change are not capturing the local skill changes. So we need to have a separate treatment for the urban climate. Since economy is closely linked to the urban climate, and in fact, there is a clear, national level study has also been done that the GDP of the cities are getting very closely linked to the impact on the infrastructure due to the urban climate. Also, there is a need to have an exclusive discourse on the urban climate, especially how it impacts the population and the infrastructure. And therefore, there is a new community globally developing on urban climate. We, in fact, as a part of this exercise of setting up a national network program, we had identified several hot spots in terms of cities and their issues. For example, the key issue in some city is heat wave. For example, there are 2 or 3 cities identified where heat wave is more pronounced. Similarly, certain cities in India are prone to heavy rain or urban flooding. Also, some cities have serious urban water scarcity and drought issue. urban pollution and urban heat island are another issue which some cities are facing. And also there is some kind of shifting of timing for rainfall is also observed in some cities. In the coastal areas, we have sea breeze changes and circulation changes. India being such a diverse, having such a diverse climatology, it has coastal cities where the climate is different, Himalayan cities, some Himalayan cities, arid, semi-arid, and so many different diverse climate cities, and therefore there was a need to take up a diverse, range of cities. As I said, heat wave is a very serious issue in some of the cities now. In fact, in India, it is found that heat wave, extent, duration, and intensity, all the three are changing in the entire country. And this becomes a serious issue, not just from the climate point of view, but also from the health point of view. And we had, in fact, carried out several studies on the impact of this on the heat. That being the case, the cities are in fact observing, experiencing much intense heat as compared to the rural areas, and that is so. This is an added factor that urban climate is introducing to the global climate. Very interesting trend that we have observed, that the low and moderate events almost over the entire country is decreasing in number, whereas the heavy and very heavy rainfall are increasing in number. This is across the country that we find this kind of trend, and urban areas are in fact much more pronounced in such kind of trend. We did a study recently showing that the population density is well correlated with the intensity of the rainfall. So the key cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, and all are showing these trends where the population density and heavy rainfall intensity are getting correlated. Some of the issues that we took up as a part of the network program on urban climate include, say, example, as a part of the urban climate, we did in temperature and heat island and heat stress issues, land use and land cover issues, and also population density and the human activity over some of the issues. As a part of the urban hydrology, the intensity of rainfall, land use planning as a result of the changing rainfall pattern. Also, the drainage system needs to be addressed as a part
Excuse
of the.
me, Dr.
this thing.
Gupta.
Yeah, I'll just take 2 minutes.
Okay,
1 minute.
just 1 minute, please.
Urban, and the urban infrastructure also, we had data availability, urban data, as well as the air quality data as a part of this. These 3 cities we have taken in the first phase, and 5 cities have been taken. So this is the network of the cities where we have taken the studies. I would say so. These are the work element where the observation and climatology, as well as the modeling and future projections, were added as a part of all the 3 components. Some of the results that we have got, so now it's really clearly that there is a urban heat island seen in various cities. This is an observation for the one city where the population density and the urban heat island are getting correlated. This is a projection showing that the trend showing 2004 to 2015, the urban heat island is showing increase in terms of its magnitude. This is my last slide showing that in the RCK 8.5 scenario, for future 1 and future 2, the true scenario showing that the intensity of rainfall is going to increase, for the particular, especially for the shorter duration rain, are going to be more pronounced at time. We have taken this in the initial 3 cities. 5 more cities are going to be taken in the time in this year itself, or early next year. And so these are results showing that I think there is a need to have focus on urban climate by every country. I think. Thank you very much.
I'm terribly sorry to rushing you, but time is running short. And when I heard Dr. Gupta's presentation, looks like that the issues relating to the climate change is probably similar for all over the world, like India, Korea, and UK, and other countries are sharing the same problems. And please stay in line, please. We will have a Q&A session afterwards. And we have a second panelist. He's Dr. François Berthier. He is a business person, head of 5 different companies. And also, he's the chairman of Buick Immobile. I hope this is correct pronunciation, and other countries, the companies as well. And he worked previously. He worked as the CEO of the France Construction SA, etc. And title of his talk is Paris Climate Action Plan. Well, good morning, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you today. Of course, I would have much preferred to be physically present in Korea, but pandemic decided otherwise. I will present you the Paris Climate Action Plan. The goal of this plan is to be zero GHG city before 2050. It was initiated in 2005 with the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, gathering 4 cities in the world, representing 70% of the GHG emission. It was reinforced by the COP21 in Paris, of course, and there was at this time a climate summit for local leaders in Paris with the mayor of Paris, Madame Hidalgo. This Paris Climate Action Plan, adopted in 2018, includes 500 measures in all sectors: building, urban planning, transport, energy, food waste, and finance. And the goal is to make Paris carbon neutral, resilient, and inclusive before 2050, I said, and we'll focus today on buildings, urban planning, transport, and energy, leaving apart food waste and finance. The key figures nowadays: the city of Paris, it's 2.1 million residents, 105 square kilometers. It's a very dense city. The local CO2 emissions, 6 million tons of CO2, and the carbon footprint, including the outer emissions related to Paris, is 25.6 million tons. These figures are from 2014. So we can split this figure. The outer Paris emission, air transport, the passengers and goods coming to Paris, so going from Paris, 8.7 million tons. Food consumption, 4.8. Outer Paris transport on road transport, 3.4. Materials construction, 1.4. Upstream energy, 1.3. And within Paris, the residential is 2.1, tertiary 2, split roughly the same level. The transport within Paris by car, 1.3, waste 0.4, in the industry, which is very small in Paris, of course, 0.1. So you can see the split of the footprint, which the goal is to have a carbon footprint of 0 in 2050. So the local emission should be completely suppressed in 2050 with three stages. 2020 minus 30% from 2014, 2030 minus 50%, and outer Paris emission. Paris cannot suppress them completely, but wants to divide them by 5, and it will compensate, and I will see how they will do that a little further. So that's the pathway. The targets for 2030, minus 50% of local greenhouse gas emissions, minus 40% of the Paris carbon footprint, minus 35% of energy consumption, 45 renewable energy, including 10% locally produced, 0 fossil fuel and domestic heating oil area in 2030, which is very, very ambitious. And there's, of course, air quality goal, which is important. And targets for 2050, carbon neutrality, we have seen that before. And which is very important, the city of Paris wants to carry out the transition which is socially fair and acceptable by the population. So the big picture so we'll focus now on energy, then buildings and urban planning, then mobility. Energy supply and demand. The big picture, you see the consumption in 2004 and the evolution which is scheduled. The electricity, conventional electricity, will disappear. You must remember that conventional electricity is in France mainly produced by nuclear plants, so it's already decarbonized. But anyway, the conventional electricity must disappear. Fossil gas disappear also between 2030 and 2050. Fossil district heating, there is a very important district heating network in Paris, which disappear also. The fossil district, the network will continue to be operated, but with biogas. Diesel, gasoline, oil fuel must disappear before 2030. There is already some restriction on the fact that some cars cannot enter Paris. Some diesel cars in some days of the year when the air pollution is very high. But in 2030, they will be forbidden. And then the imported renewable energy and the local renewable energy will, of course, provide all the supply in 2050. So how do that? How will do that? Shall we do that? Smart networks for municipal assets. In fact, the city owns a lot of assets like schools, office space, and museums and things like that. And they are developing a smart network management tool for managing the uses and the maintenance of the balance between energy in grids and networks and energy consumption. That's the first one. You know that Paris is known as the city of light, and we will remain the city of light. But we have a very ambitious plan to replace the lighting facilities by LED, LED, and to develop new services with the connected lighting facilities. energy supply and demand, local production. It's quite difficult to have local production in Paris, but the city will develop one solar power plant in the Bois de Vincennes. Bois de Vincennes is the park, rather important park in the east of Paris, but it's in Paris. And the city of Paris invests in a solar power plant in this park between 5,000 and 10,000 square meters, and also they will provide, they will help people to install solar panels on the roofs of the buildings when it's possible. It's not possible everywhere. And another way to produce locally energy is the recovery of calories from waste centers and use it for heating municipal facilities like swimming pools and also housing by the network, the heating network. That's a local production. And in Paris, of course, the city of Paris, they possess and as land owns land outside the French capital, and the city of Paris directly and its operators. And on these pieces of land, the city of Paris will develop and pay and invest windmill for renewable energy production by windmills or wind turbines and carbon sequestration capacities. And also they will financially participate to production capacities to produce biogas and to produce and to install solar panels. And the goal is 50 square kilometers of solar panels, 3,000 wind turbines, and 9 terawatt-hour of biogas. That's the report. That's for energy. For buildings and urban planning.
1 minute, please.
Excuse me?
1 minute, please.
Yes, energy demands from building 80%, the GHG 20%, but you must have in mind that many of the buildings are very old. 3/4 of the building were built before 1915. So it's and you cannot destroy them. So the way to do that is to refurbish them. And there is a very important plan to do that. Heat island mitigation is a problem, but I have no time to develop. So building renovation for municipal facilities, for social housing, and also for private housing. And the city has set a third-party financing company to help the owner to refurbish their buildings. Mobility, you see what I was saying, that no more diesel in 2030, gasoline decreasing very quickly, and gas and electricity taking the lead. And already the public transportation system are run by electricity and hydrogen for some buses. So, and last slide, very large development of bike lanes, and especially with COVID, many bike lanes have been created, temporary bike lanes have been created in May 2020, and the city has just decided to make them definitive. So, I'm sorry to go very fast at the end, but time is, I wanted to stay in the time. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I also have been to COP21 when Paris Agreement was passed. And I'm very happy to hear about a very ambitious plan of City of Paris for combating climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, next panelist, last panelist, not the least panelist, is Dr. Cherari. I'm sorry, Yora Che. She is the director of the Climate, Air Quality and Safety Division of Korea Environment Institute. And Dr. Che is specialized in integrated assessment of climate change and air pollution. Yeah. Dr. Che, please come here. Her recent work includes the socio-economic impact of heat wave, integrated analysis of climate mitigation and adaptation, and she's going to give a talk about the customized heat wave policy based on contextualized impact. Please go ahead.
Thank you for introduction. Good evening, or good afternoon, and good morning. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for staying late for me to speak. As Dr. Kwon introduced, I'm going to talk about how do we deal with climate change more effective way, especially heat wave. So climate change is not the only risk we have to deal with. We have to deal with COVID-19, air quality, and other sustainable issues. So we have to deal with climate change impact and minimize the negative impact of climate change in more smart way. How do we do that? So today I'm going to mainly talk about the heat wave in many issues of climate change. So as we already experienced in many parts of the world, heat wave is getting worse. Year 2018, in Korea, we have very severe heat wave impacts, and the intensity, duration, and frequency of heat wave is getting worse year by year, and is even getting worse in the future, as expected by many scientists. And impacts of heat wave are not just decided by the temperature, but in many countries and in many cities, the measures or policies are based on temperatures. So they issued a warning based on the certain temperature level. In Korea, for example, 33 centigrade and 35 centigrade, they issued warning. However, impacts are contextualized by many factors. And this figure shows the factors decide the impacts. Impacts are consist of the topography of the region, so whether they are a mountain or water nearby, and land use, whether they are building area, rural area, there are many forests, and built-up areas, and infrastructure, whether the area has some cooling centers or the hospitals are nearby. What about mobility? So public transportation is also important. So it all decides the vulnerability of that region and that people, and people don't stay in that region, they move around. So mobility is another factors decide the contextual impacts in certain time in certain region. So the measures or policy should be based on the contextual impacts, not just by the temperature. And this figure shows why the impacts-based warning or impact forecast is very important to deal with the heat wave. Sorry. Yeah, so the above picture shows the impacts of in Seoul metropolitan area, Seoul, Gyeonggi, Incheon. Sorry, I cannot see. So the gray bar represents the heat-related illness, and the green line is daily maximum temperature. And this one shows heat wave warning issued by the KMA, and the bottom line shows the impact-based forecast. So in metropolitan area, like Seoul metropolitan area, so the increase of heat-related illness is quite correlated with the temperature. But bottom figure shows that in the case of Gangwon, where the temperature is relatively lower than the other region in Korea. But so the heat wave warning has not been issued in Gangwon area. But as you can see at the pictures, the green bar represents the heat-related illness. So heat-related illness already happens in Gangwon area despite of low temperatures. So we have to see the impacts, actual impact, not just by the temperature to deal with climate change. And often the contextual heat wave impacts are differ by socio-economic status. These figures shows how the health impacts are differ by age, occupation, chronic disease, and income level, and household type. As you can see, the elderly people are more vulnerable to heat wave, and outdoor workers are more vulnerable than indoor workers. And people with chronic disease are more vulnerable. Low-income people are more vulnerable. And one-person households are more vulnerable. But sometimes it's not independent. There are people with old age and working outdoors, and that people often have some chronic disease and low income level, and they live one-person household. So they are very vulnerable to heat waves. So we have to find where these vulnerable people live and the temperature level to increase their health risk. Yep, so this figure shows in detail of the health impacts or the severity of impacts and the vulnerable groups. So our patient numbers are increasing as the temperature increase, outdoor, elderly, and chronic in order. And after that, the hospital admissions start to increase and mortality rate is increased. So, and it all has different temperature, and the temperature level is different also by region. So, climate change risk have to deal with, yeah. So the risk matrix of climate change is often decided by the severity of impacts, which is in terms of heat wave, is from the heat-related illness, hospital admission, and mortality increase. And y-axis is the probability, likelihood, and the number of people exposed to the heat wave. So the most risk person, the risky warning level should be issued in the severe impacts with a high probability, and the level of the temperature is differ by the socioeconomic status and by region. And what about the hotspots? So as I said before, people don't stay in the same spots all the time; they move around. So we have to find the hotspots. Hotspots are usually defined with a high temperature where the vulnerable people live. So and we can use the mobile phone data. Every people has mobile phone, and they have a signal. So by analyzing that signal, we can know where the vulnerable people, so elderly and low-income people live, where the temperature is high, and these are the hotspots. So how do we deal with the heat wave more smart way? So heat wave is one of the main concerns for climate change. So vulnerabilities of heat wave are different with age, occupation, household type, and income, and other things. And heat wave policy needs to be based on contextualized impacts and policy priorities should be based on that hotspots. So with limited resource, we can first implement measures in hotspots. And big data or data can help to identify who, where, and when is most vulnerable, not just by heat wave and other climate change impacts as well. Yeah, thank you. I see time. Yeah.
Dr. Che, please stay here. we are going to stay here for the final Q&A session and discussion. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Che. And for session 4, we have 3 speakers and 3 panelists. For all of them, thank you for sharing innovative technologies, thoughts, and adaptation and mitigation policies to overcome climate crisis that we are facing today. And I don't know whether this could be the answer to the Cherry's talk today. She said that be my hero, but maybe we should work harder to be a hero for the future generations. Okay, please have a seat. Actually, we have many excellent talk, and it was very difficult to ask you to finish within time limits. So we are a little bit short of time for the Q&A. But at first, I would like to ask the floor if anyone had a question. And is there? Okay, yeah, over there.
Yeah, hi, my name is Hei Nim from Sungmyeong Women's University. I have a question to the Professor Richard Dawson. Okay, did you take into account the vulnerabilities the recent pandemic highlighted with the high concentrated cities?
No, the simulations and analysis that you saw was all done before the recent pandemic. More recently, we have been looking at the effects of the pandemic on mobility. We've seen during the lockdown in the United Kingdom, we saw a big drop in transport and movement. And within our cities, we also saw a change in energy and water consumption as people spent more time working from their homes rather than in businesses. I think the next stage, now we have lots of this data, is to see what effect that has on issues like resilience in terms of climate change impacts. And I'm sure, I think we heard from other colleagues on the panel how the pandemic was influencing greenhouse gas emissions and air quality as well. So I'm sure they might have additional thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, looks like we don't have any more questions from the floor. So, I would like to talk with you.
Yes.
Yeah, like 10 more minutes or so.
Yeah, we have 10 more minutes to go.
Yeah.
No,
I'm sorry that we cannot have 10 minutes, but I would like to ask all of you to give a final comment. But if you are willing, then please give us introduce a most important technology or policy in the cities to reduce energy demand. Looks like from the Paris Climate Action, they are planning to the energy demand is 50% lower than now. So I was wondering, how what kind of technology or policy will make this energy demand lower, like 50%? I think that is a very important question to if we are going for the zero energy, zero carbon.
Net zero.
Net zero.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Net zero society. So I will give you about 30 seconds or let's say 1 minute for each. And 1 minute. But if you are willing to introduce your thoughts on the reducing energy demand, please include in your final comments. I would like to start from the end. So I would like to ask Dr. Che to give us a final comment.
Is it have to be to reduce energy demand or
No.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot from the speakers in other parts of the world, and we experience similar problems, and there are many measures available, many policies, good practices available, and it is good to share our knowledge and methodology and data to find a better way to deal with it. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, next, Dr. Berrutier, please.
So I think that there's very great similarities between our presentations, and I've been very impressed by JEGU program, which is quite similar to this Paris program, and we must act on many technologies, on mobility and thermal integration for the buildings.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, then if maybe we can move to Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta.
Yeah, thank you. I think in order to reduce the energy requirement, I think we need to have better efficiency. So energy efficiency is the answer, so that the more energy is available to the population, which is not getting the energy, and also creating a larger mix of renewable energy and nuclear energy with the fossil fuel energy. In fact, that is the answer. In fact, India is working on this. Today, as on date, we have already achieved 37% of the renewable energy in the total energy mix. And energy efficiency also, I think, is that we are targeting very high, value. I think that is the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And now, Dr. Liz Berman.
So net zero by 2050 might seem daunting, but the IPCC 1.5 degree report shows that is really what is necessary. Yeah. We already have more than 70 countries that have committed to net zero by 2050. It might seem strange, but countries like Denmark, their new prime minister stood up last year and committed in the UN to 70% reduction by 2030. And businesses, the private sector, were behind her, were not opposing. It is not going to be one technology. But when we do the long-term strategy studies, the LEDs, the low emission development strategies by 2050, we can demonstrate, as we have done for country after country, that if you put all these technologies together, from energy efficiency in buildings, energy efficiency in industry, reusing waste, having clean energy, looking at agriculture, when you put all these things together in a package that makes more sense for each country, it is possible.
Yeah, now I'm getting more optimistic. Okay.
And necessary.
I mean, the optimistic future is probably what I'm saying optimistic is because that is for the sustainable future. Yeah. Okay. Now, Professor Dawson.
Thank you. I think slightly different issue. I think we need to be much more conscious about the carbon that we are locking in every time we build infrastructure. So that is the carbon in the materials we use, but also that infrastructure development locks in patterns of behavior. It locks in future urban development because it stays around for decades, if not centuries. So we really need to be very conscious of that. And there's no sort of single solution, but one strategy for improving, if you like, reducing the carbon intensity of our infrastructure is to make better use of what we often term nature-based solutions or green infrastructure, which can be more flexible, and they often provide a wider range of co-benefits, for example, around air quality, surface water flood management, and so on.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. And Mr. Kim?
Oh, yeah. As Frank rightly pointed out, I really welcome Korea's New Deal, but to make it really meaningful, we need to have a certain target. Without it, we are just going to see the assembly or a kind of aggregate of various projects without concrete directions. So we really need that. And as for the technology, as many of us said, there is no one single solution to this. As I said earlier in my presentation, we need a kind of new industrial ecosystem that can embrace new green energy and new green mobility and new green technology that work together. Well, I had a chance to talk with the dialogue with Mr. Patti Virol, who is the head of the IEA. He said hydrogen is coming much faster than we thought before. I think so. And he said, well, in the meantime, we also need to keep the nuclear in the energy mix for the sake of emission reduction. But as I said, no single technology can save us from this climate crisis. What is more important than the set of technology is, again, political will. We need a certain national and global target which allow us to mobilize all the resources available together. It's up to us in the end. Yeah, right.
I heard that there is a question.
Okay, this is, I am the Honam Chang, the Professor Emeritus at CAETS. I have some basic question about the energy. I understand in the universe only, say, hydrogen exists, but on Earth we have carbon and the hydrogen together. Maybe there is another atomic energy.
Yes.
There got to be some balance between carbon and hydrogen because I major in the work on the biomass. Biomass is huge. If there are no human in the earth, the whole earth will be covered by biomass. Each year, huge amounts of biomass overproduced. Do you have any idea the balance between carbon dioxide, carbon biomass, or carbon energy and the hydrogen energy? Because the hydrogen energy, if you make hydrogen energy but was atomic energy, it will be cheapest. So it's a guideline. Thank you.
Is there anyone who's going to address this issue?
I'd be happy to say that I'm not worried for quite a long time about biomass overproduction. We have seen decades of losing carbon from the soil, of deforestation.
Yes.
So I'd be happy to see a problem with biomass overproduction. For right now, we are facing quite a large shortage. So I think we have to turn the system around first before that becomes a problem.
And in addition to what Frank said, I think we might face with the food shortage problem
Yeah.
in a more serious manner. But that's what climate crisis is giving huge damage on soil and food production. I mean, agriculture and land use. So it's another big problem. So I don't worry about the oversupply of biomass. And
It's another meeting, but I'm also on the advisory panel of the Global Bioeconomy Summit. And there are many alternative uses for biomass. Basically, to cut a long story short, pretty much any application of fossil fuels can be replaced by biomass, whether it's plastics or anything else. So there are many other ways to think of a circular economy where biomass plays a much bigger role replacing fossil fuels.
And my colleague, whose name is Lee Sang-yup, who is a very promising professor of CAETS, and he's now taking advantage of the metabolism technology, using new technology and to maximize the use of biomass. That would be another window for hope.
Okay.
But basically, we don't have time.
Right now it is 6 o'clock in Korean time, so I shouldn't say this anymore, but let me just conclude this session because other pitching, IR pitching is waiting after. I think the session 4, we share the thoughts on how to create sustainable societies and stop climate crisis by developing new technologies and policy measures. I hope this at least gives some this discussion at least gives some stepping stone for sustainable future for Earth and humankind. Thank you very much for watching this session and staying late. We appreciate your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for your heated discussion.
Thank you.
Again, I thank all participants of session 4. Now we only have 2 startup pitches left. So I'm going to introduce the first one who also have made outstanding achievement over the past year. The first company to give their pitch is the Wave Talk of South Korea. Wave Talk of South Korea have developed technology that detects bacteria using IoT water sensors. And they're here in person. Please begin your presentation.
Hi everyone, thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm Eun-seok Cho, Marketing Manager at the Wave Talk. The Wave Talk is a 4-year-old Korean startup, and we have innovative laser light scattering technology originally developed by CAETS in Korea. Today I'm going to introduce our company, technology, and our products. So we have developed a technology that can rapidly and precisely detect foreign substances, including bacteria, inside liquid. So based on the technology, we developed a smart IoT water sensor, and then in vitro diagnostics / quality control devices. So person on the left is our current CEO, Young-da Kim. He's a serial entrepreneur in the hardware business. And the person on the right is our co-founder, Professor Yong-keun Park, who is a physics professor at CAETS. He's the original developer of this technology. During the past 4 years, we received yeah, we received many industry awards and media recognitions. And if I name a few, we were selected as top 8 patents in 2018. And in 2019, we won Water Industry Innovation Award. And more recently this year, January, we won CES 2020 Innovation Award. Oops. So this is how our technology works. So basically, our technology consists of 2 parts. One is hardware, which amplifies the laser scattering signal. And then the second part is software, which analyzes the speckle images of reflected lights. So based on this technology, the first product we developed is IoT Water Sensor, which we call SenseCup. And we plan to launch this SenseCup in domestic market in Korea first next month. So this is an IoT device, so it can be connected to the mobile app, and consumers can easily check water turbidity at home within 10 to 15 seconds, and they can check the results on their mobile app. So this is how the product works. So basically, press the button, and then it takes about 10 to 15 seconds before they get the results on their mobile app. So this is dangerous water, and the second picture shows a safe water. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that this device is very cost-effective compared to the existing water turbidimeter. Basically, what it does is checking turbidity of water, and the portable cheap turbidimeter costs about $2,000, but our device has a better performance, but way cheaper. Another product that we are working on right now is it's called Rapid Auger Reader. Basically, it's an early bacteria detection device. And for AST, so antibiotic susceptibility testing application, we are trying to reduce the current detection time of 20 to 48 hours to 6 hours using our technology. This product is we're currently developing a prototype right now. So thank you. This is the Wave Talk, and the startup who saved the most lives on Earth. That's our mission statement, and we strive every day to achieve this mission statement by providing water sensors and rapid Auger reader. Thank you very much.
The startup who saved the most lives on Earth. What an inspiring mission statement. Yes, so we have a next company joining us virtually from Finland. The company's name is Ren's Coffee Shoe of Finland, and as you can imagine, this company has manufactured waterproof shoes using coffee waste and plastic bottles. If you're there, Patrick, please start your presentation.
Hey guys, can you see me well? Guys? All right. Hi, yes, my name is Jesse, not Patrick. Patrick is my colleague, and I'm the CEO of the company. Yeah, I made it back from one meeting. So yeah, thanks for having me here today. I'm sitting here in Helsinki, Finland. Too bad I couldn't make it to Korea to be with you all. So yeah, so I am one of the 2 co-founders of Ren's. We make the world's first sneaker from coffee and plastic waste. So okay. So yeah, so this is our product, and okay, now it works. Right. So this is so we are planning to approach sustainability in a much more edgy and sexy way. So we aim to create like a really cool sustainable fashion brands for the young generation. So this is our product. This beautiful bad boy right here, made from coffee waste and recycled plastic. Coffee waste is after you drink the coffee, you throw the coffee grounds away. We take the grounds, mix it with recycled plastic, and create coffee yarn. And we make this, and this is waterproof. This is the world's lightest, coolest waterproof shoes. Yeah, and right. So yeah, the shoe is totally waterproof, and also the coffee yarn create like anti-odor, antibacteria for the shoe. It is a combination of making it from waste and all of these amazing and innovative features that we hope to attract young consumers in the market. Yes, and this is how we make it. I already said that. Yeah, and it seems like that the market agree with us. We launched the most successful fashion crowdfunding campaigns in the Nordics last year. We raised we sold over $500,000 worth of sneakers in 1 month, and it's the all-time most successful Kickstarter campaign in our country. I don't know about your country, and then it's the all-time most successful fashion crowdfunding campaign in the Nordics. Yeah, currently we are growing really fast. We are planning to grow 10 times this year, and the US is our biggest market, followed by Germany, the UK, and the Nordics. And yeah, we have a very young and diverse group of customers, quite, for both men and females, because this shoes is unisex. Yeah, and we aim to become the pioneering brand in waist-based fashion. Yeah, it's a really, this is a huge market. We're lucky to be in this market, which is still growing really fast. I think this is like the old numbers. During the pandemic, it's growing faster, but I don't know how fast. Probably double this, so 30% faster, I think. And yeah, we have been featured heavily on international news, on World Economic Forum, on on different kind of national TV. This is actually our first contact with the Korean space. And yeah, so my co-founders, we have two co-founders. I am one of them, and both of us feature on Forbes 30 under 30 in Europe. Even though I'm originally from Vietnam, but I have lived in Finland for a long time, and we are representing Finland on this Forbes 30 under 30. And yeah, you can see there we are one of the top young social entrepreneurs in Europe, alongside Greta Thunberg, one of the biggest environmental activists in the world. And yeah, so this is our market. We're planning to expand all over the world. Actually, Korea is one of our target market too. Way later in a few years. Yeah, so this is me and my co-founder. This is our group of investors. Are very so you guys probably don't know them, but practically they are the most influential investors. Some of the most influential investors in Europe, and we also have investors from Tencent and from Global Fashion Group, which is pretty big in Asia, and some venture funds in Finland and in the US. And yeah, that's about it. That's all. Yeah. That's all. So my name is Jesse, and if you guys want to ask me any question, then you can ask us, because I guess we still have a few times, and you can also send me email or send me WeChat. That's it.
Thank you, Jesse, and sorry about the confusion. We had the wrong name, Patrick Nguyen, but it was actually Jesse Trump, participating virtually from Finland. So it was the final pitch, and it's past 6 o'clock already, and I know that it's time to say goodbye, but we just don't want to let you go as it is. So we just add one other special speech for a closing remark, I would say. So I would love to invite Vice President of NEC and also the Chairman of CAETS 2020 Organizing Committee, Dr. Donggan Park, for nice closing remarks.
Thank you very much, really, for your participation, and also I think it is very successful because of the efforts of the nice moderators and the speakers and panelists. I really appreciate your efforts. And I think we chose this smart society as a theme of CAETS 2020 around 2 years ago. And also I think is quite well matched even in 2020. So I think, and also we try to answer all the questions of the new generations. I mean, the future generations. The future generation asked us the very hard work and the smart work, and we tried our best, but I don't know whether it is fulfilling their requirements. But as engineers and scientists, I think we should do our best efforts further to create or generate the better life by engineering. And again, thank you very much for your participation, and have a nice night, and have a nice dinner, and go to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Park. The final day of CAETS Symposium has now come to an end. I thank the audience on site especially, and also participants viewing live on YouTube. Thank you again all very much. This was your MC today, Ms. Young-in Yang, and it was a great pleasure to serve and to be a part of CAETS 2020. Goodbye and stay safe. Thank you.